Report is that the Minnesota Vikings are going to release starting running back Alexander Mattison, who took over after Dalvin Cook was released previously by the Minnesota Vikings. And this take is presented by Hochland Farm. Hochland Farm has rotationally grazed 100% grass-fed beef. They sell it in quarters and halves, and they also have sample and custom packs for you to try. You can contact Jared at 952-491-1541. Tell him you heard about Hochland Farm on the Minnesota Tim podcast for an immediate 20% off your first order. Hochland Farm. So the Minnesota Vikings released Mattison. And when you look at Mattison's season, he only did one thing that was okay. He had no explosiveness. He fumbled the ball way too much. And he didn't deliver much out of the backfield in terms of receiving the ball as well. When Ty Chandler stepped into the mold as RB1, he was much more explosive. He got a lot of yards after contact. And he just had a burst that Alexander Mattison was lacking. Now, there was a lot of discussion throughout the season on why Chandler wasn't getting more first-team reps instead of Mattison. And I defended the decision because Alexander Mattison is clearly, or was clearly at the time, the better pass-blocking running back. And the Minnesota Vikings offense is pass-heavy. So if you're a pass-heavy team, it just makes sense to have a running back that is a better blocker to be in the game. But when you look at Mattison's statistics last season, the biggest thing that jumps out to me is that on 180 carries, he had 0 touchdowns. A starting running back on a team that, if they win 2 more games, they probably are in the playoffs. Scores 0 touchdowns. He ran for 700 yards. He caught 30 passes. All of those statistics are very, very vanilla. Mattison, he is going to be a backup running back for the rest of his career in the NFL. And there's nothing wrong with that. But he definitely is not starting quality. I think a lot of Minnesota Vikings fans, myself included, were good with the idea of releasing Dalvin Cook because Alexander Mattison was waiting in the wings for a starting running back position. And that experiment failed. Now, I am surprised that the Minnesota Vikings went as far as cutting Mattison because he wasn't making all that much money. But they do save a little bit. They save $3.35 million on the cap, according to overthecap.com. But now you would have to think that the Minnesota Vikings are now going to be in the running back market, either in free agency or in the NFL draft. I know there are some decent running backs coming out in the NFL draft. Tyler Nubin from the Gophers is coming out. The Michigan running back is coming out. And there's good, solid running backs entering free agency. Like Saquon Barkley could be an option. Zach Moss I saw could be an option. And there's guys that are going to get cut as well that we don't even know are available. So the Minnesota Vikings will definitely be exploring the free agent or draft market for another running back because relying solely on Ty Chandler and McBride, I think is his name, as the backup currently, isn't going to get it done. Maybe they'll bring back Cam Akers, but bringing back a guy who's now had 2 Achilles tears doesn't seem like the best option at this point in his career. So the Minnesota Vikings, they completely cut ties with Alexander Mattison. They ripped the Band-Aid off. The experiment failed. And actually, I applaud them for doing so because they could have easily looked at themselves in the mirror and tried to defend their decision of signing Mattison to this contract and trying to make him an RB1 as long as possible to prove that their decision was correct. But they evaluated him, they evaluated what he did on the field, and he sucked. He flat out stunk. He did not produce to the level that you want a running back to produce, a starting NFL running back. So they cut ties. It was a good decision. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate, review, and follow this podcast wherever you listen to this podcast. Again, Hokeland Farm, rotationally grazed, 100% grass-fed beef. Contact Jared today at 952-491. Also, I forgot the final 4 digits. 1541. Tell him you heard about him on the Minnesota Tim podcast for 20% off your first order. Thank you, and everyone have a great day.